Have you ever walked out of a doctor's appointment feeling like you've been dismissed or ignored? That you not only don't have the answers you need or a plan going forward, but that the whole thing was just a big waste of your time? I'm going to share some things you can do before the appointment that will just take you a few minutes that will help you give your doctor the information he or she needs so that they can better come up with a plan for you. And at the end, I'm going to share some ways that you can shift the conversation if you still don't feel like you've been heard. Last year was quite a year for my husband and me, especially medically. Between the two of us, we had 4 surgeries, 5 procedures, and countless doctor's visits. So we had a lot of chances to practice what I'm about to talk about. Now, most of our visits were excellent. Most of our caregivers were great. But we had one appointment in that whole slew of appointments that did not go well. And I really think that this was a case of just a good doctor having a bad day. But when we talk about it now, we refer to it as the appointment that he was in such a big hurry to get out of the room that I thought I was going to have to tackle him to get him to stop, listen, and answer the questions. Now, I've been talking to doctors my entire career, but if I hadn't been prepared with the questions we needed answered that day, I probably would have been too flustered to speak up and advocate for us. Now, one thing just for clarity, I realize you don't always see a doctor when you go to a medical appointment. Sometimes you see a mid-level practitioner, and by a mid-level practitioner, I mean a nurse practitioner or a physician assistant. I'm going to say doctor appointment just for simplicity's sake, but just keep in mind this applies to any kind of provider appointment where you need a diagnosis or a plan. And of course, when I talk about these things, I realize that this is just the facts of living in our imperfect world. I wish in the United States that all physicians had an hour to sit down with all of their patients and go through everything that's bothering them, go through the whole backstory of how everything came to pass. That would be ideal. But that's not the system that we work in right now. And I know as much as you don't like it, just keep in mind that there's a very good chance your doctor doesn't like it either. Just like the rest of us, with a very few exceptions, your doctor has a boss. Your doctor has an employer that he or she has to answer to. Most doctors really don't have much control over how full their schedule is for the day, how much time they're given for appointments. So I'm just giving you ways that you can speak to them and make it as easy for them as possible so they can think through what your problem is and come up with a plan. So first off, I'm going to share an acronym, and this is something that I learned in pharmacy school. This is the information that all healthcare professionals want when they are trying to gather a history or figure out exactly what the problem is and what the patient standing in front of them needs. And the acronym is OLD CARTS. And what that stands for is onset, location, duration, character, aggravating factors, relieving factors, treatments tried, and severity. Now, some of those are pretty obvious. Onset, when did it start? Location, where is it bothering you? Duration, how long has this been going on? Character, well, what that means, is it a throbbing pain? Is it a stabbing pain? Aggravating factors and relieving factors, what makes it better? What makes it worse? And then treatment tried and severity. But not only is it essential that you cover all that information, there's ways to share it that can make things easier on your doctor. And I'm going to give an example of something that happened to me 30 years ago. 30 years ago, I dislocated my kneecap. Now, it's been too long ago for me to really recall how that appointment went. But I can give some examples of how I could have shared the story of what happened and covered all the information that I just gave you in that acronym in a way that might have made it hard for my doctor to listen or follow what I was trying to say. So here's how I could have given the information. Last Saturday, we were going to a wedding and we were gonna ride with my husband's boss, Eddie, and his wife, Brenda. And so we were gonna meet them at Best Buy parking lot because the wedding was on the Illinois side of the river. But we were running late because we ran into construction, and I just know Eddie hates to be late. So I was rushing, trying to get into the back seat of Eddie's car, and I twisted and my knee gave out. Now, there's more to that story about how my knee looked, but if you're squeamish, I don't want to kind of gross you out. So I'll just leave it at that. But you can use your imagination. I dislocated my kneecap. And that pretty much gave the doctor the story of what happened and what I was doing. But I'm going to share another acronym with you. And I don't want to get acronym heavy, but this is an old military acronym that you might have heard of. And it's called BLUF. BLUF. Bottom line up front. And I don't mean to be harsh. It's not that your doctor doesn't care. They care about your life. They care about what happens to you. But like I said, they are living in a reality of a busy schedule. They might be aware that there are a lot of people waiting on them. They might be running behind that day, and they know it's going to be hard to get caught up. And we're all human. Just think about it. Let's say you're in a hurry to go to work because you have an important meeting with your boss at 9 o'clock and you have to stop and get gas first. And while you're at the gas station, you run into a friend, you ask the friend how they're doing, and they start telling you this story about this problem they're having. Either maybe they're having a problem with their teenager, or maybe they had a fight with their husband that day. You might really care. You might really love your friend. You want to know the story. You want to help them, but you have the reality of you need to be somewhere in just a few minutes, and you just might not have time right in that moment, no matter how much you care, to really listen and absorb and pay attention. And that's what your doctor is up against too. It's not that they don't care, it's that they just are so limited on their time. And again, they probably wish it wasn't that way, but it is that way. And so if you want to get the answers you need, you have a better chance of getting them if you are able to stay right with the facts. So let's go back to my story about my knee. So what I could have just said was, this happened 4 days ago. I was rushing to get in a car. I happened to have on a dress with a tight skirt and heels. And when I twisted to get into the car, my knee gave out. So that would give the doctor a very clear picture of what happened to my knee. And then I could go on to share just maybe a few details, like it was a really important wedding, so I was able to push through to make it to the wedding, but we had to cut the night short and go home. And by the next day, I couldn't even get up to go to the bathroom without help. It hurt so bad. And then I could share what the pain felt like. It was pretty constant. It was pretty bad. What I'd done, I'd been taking ibuprofen. It helped a little bit. It probably took my pain from a 7 to a 3, but then I could just say, I still feel real unsteady. I don't like to put weight on it. It feels like it's going to give out again. That's going to give them all the information they need to go forward. Now, one problem with that example is the diagnosis was pretty evident from the start. What if your symptoms are a little more vague? Well, that's why you're going to have to think about it ahead of time to see if you can give as many examples as you can. So instead of just saying, I feel really tired, just say, I am so exhausted by the middle of the afternoon. I have trouble staying awake or paying attention in meetings, and that's just not like me. And you can talk about what you've done. I've really tried hard to make sure I'm getting as much sleep at night as I can. Or you could say, I've always tried to get enough sleep. I haven't made any changes, but now I'm more tired than normal. So the more specific examples you can give them, the better off you are. And that just means you might have to think. You might have to come up with what you were before, what you are now, what's different, and again, what you've tried, what worked, what hasn't worked. So what do you do if you get to the end of the appointment and you still don't feel like you've really been heard? Maybe you gave specific examples, you were very brief, you got right to the point, you didn't go off on rabbit trails, and you don't feel like they've listened, you don't think they've heard you. What can you do to shift the conversation? What can you say at that point if you're just being dismissed? If they just tell you, you probably need to lose weight, or you probably just need to get more sleep, or you're probably just getting older, which are some of the answers that a lot of women feel they're given before they're even heard. Well, another thing that doctors are taught when they're diagnosing people is to think through what's called the differential diagnosis. And what that is they think what it probably is, and then they're supposed to think of other things it could be and what the similarities and the differences are between what you're describing and what they think it is or what else they think it could be. So one thing you could do, especially if you've Googled, because let's face it, We all do it before we go to an appointment. You could just say, I'm familiar with, or I know someone that has this. What are the similarities and the differences between what you're thinking I have and what they have? I'm not saying you need to know what you have before you go to the doctor. That's why you're going in the first place. But it's a good practice to ask, especially if you don't feel like you're being taken very seriously. What else could this be? And what are the similarities and the differences between that and what I'm describing? This is how doctors are trained to think. So asking the question in this way can just get them to share their thought process and the way they've been trained to think about diagnosing people, to help you get some clarity on what might be going on with you and maybe why what you think you have might not be it at all. And then a few other suggestions I have. Write your questions down ahead of time. If you have 3 main questions you need answered, write them down. And also, don't be afraid to stop your doctor and ask them to repeat what they just said. I've had to do that before when I've just had to tell a doctor, this is a lot for me to take in. I'm going to need you to repeat that again, or I'm going to need you to explain that in a different way. That's okay. Don't ever be afraid to speak up if you don't understand, if they went too fast, if they said something that didn't make sense to you. Ask for clarity. That's their job. The last things you should ask before the appointment ends are, what's the plan going forward? If they've given you a treatment or if they've given you some medication, ask, when will it start to feel better? And then you can ask things like, if I don't feel better, at what point should I call you back? I hope this helped you. I hope this gave you some ideas. I hope this gave you some ways to prepare for your next appointment. And I hope this helped you better understand some of the things your doctor is up against in their day-to-day life and how they're thinking and what their thought process is as they try to think through your problems and try to think through a plan for you. Now, this was a more practical how-to video, but I share videos once a week where I think about our health and how that affects our faith and how we as Christians can honor God with our bodies. If this is something that interests you, I hope you consider subscribing.